Welcome to the second video in the Getting Started with Analyst Notebook series. This video focuses on using the identity and label item properties in Analyst Notebook. Understanding the identity item property is fundamental to chart creation and analysis. Let's take a look at a simple Analyst Notebook chart. The chart clearly shows the relationships between items on the chart, but has no data about what those items represent. To add greater value to the chart, we need data. Without data, we cannot analyze the chart contents. Let's take a look at one of the items on our chart. By right-clicking the item, I have the option to edit item properties. Alternatively, I can double-click the item to go there directly. There are 5 places here that can be used to store data. These are the label and identity, the date and time properties, description and grades, attributes, and cards. For this demonstration, we will focus on storing data in the label and identity item properties. So what is the identity? The identity is the unique identifier for an entity and is used to match new items added to the chart, or when copying and pasting, when importing or bringing in data from a different data source. In addition, the identity of an entity is used by many of the analytical tools that are provided as part of Analyst Notebook. When assigning an identity to a record, it's important to consider what items of information can be used to create that unique identity. This will vary depending on the type of entity being created. Here are some examples of possible unique identifiers for certain entity types. For a person, you may wish to consider using a national identifier, such as Social Security number or passport number. For a mobile telephone, you might combine telephone number with country and area codes. For a location, the full address might be sufficient to uniquely identify it. However, the values used to create a unique identity for the chart entity will be strongly influenced by the available source data too. Let's look at some example data for people I may wish to add to a chart. I need to determine which data to use to create a unique identity for each of the records in the dataset. In this example, I have information on first names and last names, as well as some related information about their social security numbers, dates of birth, email addresses, and telephone numbers. The first name and last name by themselves are unlikely to provide a unique identity, especially with very common first and last names. My source data has a column for social security number, which is a strong unique identifier, but it is not available for all records in my dataset. We also have information on telephone numbers. This is available for all records, but these do not provide a strong level of uniqueness, as telephones may be shared, or subscribers may change their number or have more than one telephone number. For this data source, combining the first and last name information with the date of birth, which is available for all records, should provide a reasonably unique identity for each person in the dataset. So why is the identity so important? It can help us to avoid duplicate information on charts. Let's open one of the example charts provided with Analyst Notebook. These are linked from the Documents folder and will have been installed if you chose the typical install option when you installed Analyst Notebook. I've opened the Social Network Analysis example chart, simply because it's a nice clean chart with people on it that will illustrate how the identity property works. I'd like to add a new person to the chart, Esri Duke. Without looking at the chart in detail, I'm going to go ahead and add him. From the Insert from Palette panel on the right-hand side, make sure that the icon entity representation is selected. From the Common palette, drag and drop the male person entity type onto the chart. Double-click the entity that will be used to represent Esri Duke on the chart. The only information I have is his name, so that will be used as the identity for this entity. I will enter Esri Duke with the last name fully capitalized. Note that the identity box has turned red. This indicates that this identity is already being used by an item on the chart. If you look, you can see him on the chart under Robert Holder. The identity property is case and character sensitive. If I add additional characters, spaces, or carriage returns, or change the case on the last name, then a match will not be found on the chart, and the identity property box will turn black, and I'll be able to add the record to the chart. Analyst Notebook takes every character and every letter's case into consideration when comparing the content of every entity's identity on the chart. This helps to prevent the creation of duplicate data but it is very important to be consistent with how information is entered into the identity property. It is essential you understand how the identity property works to ensure you can use Analyst Notebook to its fullest capability. For this example, I will cancel the edits of the properties for my new entity and delete it from the chart, as Esri Duke is already present on the chart and I don't wish to duplicate him. Now let's look at how identities are important when copying and pasting between charts. I'm going to leave the example chart open and create a new chart. From the Quick Access toolbar on the top left, click New Standard Chart. From the Common palette, click and drag two mail icons onto the chart. Double-click one of them and enter the identity of Robert Holder, then click OK. Double-click the second entity and enter an identity of Bob Smith. From the Link section of the Insert from Palette panel, from the Common palette, select Associate. Click and hold while hovering over Robert Holder and drag onto Bob Smith. We now have a simple chart showing an association between Robert and Bob. Double-click Robert Holder. Note the spelling and capitalization of his name. Let's look at the original chart. Use the tab to view this chart. Looking carefully at this chart, we can see that there is already a Robert Holder on it. Double-click to view the identity. It's the same as the record on our other chart. So what happens if I copy my other chart into this chart? Return to the other chart by selecting the tab. Right-click in an empty section of the chart and click Select All. Now right-click over one of the selected items and click Copy. Switch back to the other chart and in an empty part of the chart, right-click and click Paste Here. A warning message may be displayed, but this can be ignored for this demonstration. We can see that Robert Holder has not been duplicated as the identities of the two chart items are identical and they have been merged on the chart. Now let's see what happens if they're different. Still in our example chart, click the Undo tool in the Quick Access toolbar until the chart is back to its original form. Click the tab to return to our other chart. Double-click Robert Holder. I will change his identity by using mixed capitalization on his last name. Select everything on the chart again and then copy. Switch to the example chart and paste the chart again. The two Robert Holders are not merged and are duplicated on the chart because the identities don't match. Remember that identities are both character and case sensitive. Now that we understand identities and how they help prevent duplication on charts, let's have a look at labels. A label is a textual description of the item on the chart and is usually shown on the chart. The label works in tandem with the identity field, but it is not character or case sensitive and is generally not used for analysis purposes. On many charts, the identity and label are the same, but in some cases the data that makes a good identity for a chart entity is not a good label for presentation purposes. In this example, we have a national ID card which includes details of the person's name and date of birth, as well as a national identifier number. The national identifier number will make a very good identifier when adding Esther to the chart, as it is unique to her. However, it does not make a good label for the entity on the chart, as it is difficult to identify people based on a string of numbers. Let's add Esther to a new chart. In the Identity field, I will enter her national identifier number and then click OK. While the national identifier number is unique, it is not helpful in making the chart user-friendly, making it difficult to identify a specific person. Using the Label field will solve this problem. To add the label, we will double-click the chart item to view the label and identity properties. Tick the label is different from identity box and enter the data you wish to use as a label, in this case Esther's first and last name, and click OK. Esther's record on the chart now has a label that is easy to identify, as well as a unique identity to help avoid duplication. Now in summary, let's look at what we've learned so far. The identity is a unique identifier for an entity. The identity prevents duplication of entities on the chart. The identity is case and character sensitive. Many of the analysis tools in Analyst Notebook use the identity for analysis purposes. The label is displayed on the chart. It is not character or case sensitive, and it is used to make the chart more user-friendly. Thank you for watching this video. Please return later for the next in the series.